Being is immovable, eternal. Consciousness is unchanging, infinite. Such is the real nature of the self. In this lies the permanence of self-realization. The unchanging, infinite consciousness is itself the knowledge that constitutes self-realization. It is not something lost or acquired, but rather the very nature of your being, which neither comes from anywhere nor goes anywhere. For the perfection of bliss, all that is needed is self-knowledge, the self-revelation of this consciousness. In self-knowledge, that is the revelation of the unmoving and the unchanging, lies deep peace, absolute peace, silent peace. It is unaffected by the illusory world. It is unaffected by the illusory body. It transcends modes of an illusory mind. The one thing to be sought, it is actually innate. By Sri Bhagavan's instruction and with his grace, dive inward, inquiring to know who you are. Cast aside every objectified conception. So that the self-luminous consciousness rests in its own nature as it is. If anything appears, it is known in and by that luminous consciousness. If nothing appears, that nothing is known by the same luminous consciousness. It is the only knower in all the apparent knowers. It is the only actual knowledge in all the apparent knowledge. Nothing has an existence apart from that. In that, though, that alone exists. That consciousness is truly the self. As there are not two or more selves, but only one self, how can ignorance be sustained? The peace of the self is always there. Ignorance alone seems to veil it. Knowledge destroys ignorance. This knowledge is self-knowledge. Inquiring to realize this as your very nature, you will find ignorance to be non-existent. The Vedas declare Prajnana Brahma, supreme knowledge or consciousness is Brahman. Do you comprehend? If this is understood, by what light is it known? If you think that you do not understand, by what light is that thought known? The consciousness is invariable, inescapable, and changeless. The consciousness is itself the supreme knowledge. inquire and know yourself as that, and that alone is the reality. Reality means that which exists. There is no question of anything else.
Thank you, Master. Among the many things about your discourse, one of the things I really loved was the simplicity of if there's understanding, by what light? If there is the thought of not understanding, by what light is that thought? Because it was clear that it applies to everything. Everything has to begin with the knowing of it. And that can leave one without any support for individual existence. But the wonderful part is it also leaves you lost in the infinite.
And the infinite, which is the support of all, has for itself no support. It is not in need of a support. It is self-evident and self-existent.
If it were imagined there was anything else, it would have to begin with knowing. And there's no getting past the knowing. And so it all reverts back to the same thing.
That's right. Since there's no getting away from the knowing, and since the knowing is of a non-objective nature, that it is the nature of the I, how can there be bondage? Since knowledge is all that there is, how could there be duality? Since knowledge is the self, where is there scope for an individual? The individual has no knowledge. It certainly does not know the infinite. It is the infinite that knows about the individuality, and still knows the same when there is no individuality. This knowing consciousness is unchanging. So then the individual is neither born nor actually destroyed. Just the unchanging consciousness exists.
As I was coming to Satsang, I asked myself, how am I approaching coming to Satsang? What's my intention? And what came to mind was, how about if just for the length of the event, you don't have to do this forever, but just for the event, to meditate more intensely than I've ever meditated before. And just to see what happens. When I started to inquire, I actually saw the way that I was approaching inquiry was not to find a conclusive, doubtless answer to that question. I actually was asking kind of like, if I just keep asking long enough, something will happen and I'll find out somehow. But I wasn't actually asking, so it's obvious I'm not going to find the answer, I think, if I'm approaching it that way. Maybe Grace will help me out at some point, but I just don't think it's going to happen that way. So then I said, well, why don't you try asking that way? What happens when I try asking that way, the first thing that's there is the tendency for doubt. And so I ask, who is that one that's doubting? Or where is that coming from? What is that? Because that's the thing I think that I'm not looking at. I don't look at those sorts of things. But when I ask, like, I want a conclusive answer to this, it sure creates a much sharper edge to the discrimination.
Good, all right.
And that's where I've gotten to, kind of, is that.
Of what is the doubt?
The doubt is of an individual that thinks he can't realize the truth.
So the doubt is that you cannot realize?
Yes.
But the existence of the doubter, of him you're very certain. You have no doubts about him,
No doubts about the doubter?
his existence.
No, I just run into myself when you ask the questions. What happened? And then it's kind of like, well, where's the doubter? What was... So you framed the question for me to ask myself in a way that I could sort something out. How do I learn to answer the question for myself?
What do you mean, yourself?
Well, that would be the one who doesn't know and keeps asking questions, I guess.
Still, there's only one of you. How do you define yourself? Even in the very question, what is the supposition? When you say, how do I do this on my own or for myself? As defined by bodies existing in space and time? Such definition is insubstantial, actually entirely false.
If I look to see if I can actually define myself as somebody who can, whatever, I have to make up a second to do that. If I just stay with myself, then it's like it doesn't happen then. It doesn't happen in myself.
Doubt the definitions of the doubter. Your existence itself is never doubted. Such is not possible. The doubt as described by you may arise. Maybe I cannot realize. Maybe I can. But the existence or the consciousness that knows of such doubts is itself quite beyond them. Inquire at the depth of that existence. Inquire by the light of that very consciousness. The knowledge is neither lost nor acquired. As far as how to approach is concerned, ardently, humbly, seek the egoless state. It is the only real state that there is. When you come to satsang or to the temple at any time, what do you expect to experience? If it has to do with self-knowledge, it is non-objective in character.
If I come to the temple approaching it from an ego standpoint, I'm actually coming to get rid of that standpoint. But it often doesn't look like that until I'm actually in satsang and I can see it from the other direction.
That other direction is more your direction than what you take to be your direction.
You said in your discourse, I think you said it this way, what you seek most is innate.
That's right.
So I asked myself, what is the most innate thing about me? What is the essence of?
There's nothing comparative. There's only one thing innate.
When I focus on what's innate, it's clear it's not definable, and it's clear that the definitions don't mean anything. They're an inconsequential occurrence of what I'm not. I'm not those things going on.
That which is innate is being, only being. Being which alone exists. It is not born, and for it nothing is created. It is indestructible, and there is for it no other. Inward turned, seek ardently to know that. That is truly yourself. And that is itself the knowledge of itself. Being is knowledge. Now again, whether you understand this fully or not, by what light do you know?
I've been reading Annamalai Swami's book, Living by the Words of Bhagwan. And yesterday I was reading what he was talking about the classic example of the rope and the snake. And he says that only the rope exists. Go deep into that and just be that rope. The snake does not exist. And this is what, it's only the being, it's only that light, which is that knowledge. This snake, this world, this individual, these vasanas, nothing exists. It's just one profound existence. That's it. The Vedanta talks about Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. The Shravana is an indirect knowledge. And in this morning I was reading from the talks, and Bhagwan talks about it in this way, that it is in Sanskrit what is called as Paroksha Dhyana. And with constant contemplation, there is little glimpses of what that being in that state is. But only by the Nididhyasana, the constant meditation, can you get into that Sahaja Samadhi. And it can only be done by that constant inquiry of just coming back again and again and again. No matter what we do, because anyway it's all not real. I know I spend so much time thinking, I'm going to do this next, and I'm going to do that next, and then after another few days it will be that, and after another few months it will be that. But does it really exist? Does that time even exist? Why do I spend any energy in that?
Yes, what truly exists? Certainly, the knowledge of existence itself, its own knowledge of itself, is never indirect. It is always aparokshanubhuti, not indirect. direct experience. Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, listening, reflection, and deep continuous meditation, and the result of samadhi are spoken of. To lift one's eyes, to lift one's vision from the snake to the rope. There is no rule that it has to occur serially. It may, but it can just as well be simultaneous. After all, it is the being's knowledge of being, and not knowledge of something else. It is not something lost or acquired. Just as there is only the rope and never a snake, so there's only the self and never an individual or a mind or a world. As ignorance itself has no root and has no existence, can we really speak of stages of its dissolution? But out of compassion, wise sages have described it as such, for the benefit of spiritual aspirants seeking to know this very self. In the end, you find there was only a rope, there was no snake. What's true at the end is true all through. There was always only a rope, never a snake. There can be, therefore, no stages of reality, no degrees of reality. Likewise, as it pertaining to the snake, there can be no degrees of unreality. The real is completely real, and that alone is yourself. The unreal simply does not exist. So if the question arises, why should I spend time with the unreal? Following Sri Ramana's advice, inquire, who is spending time with the unreal? If an unreal ego spends unreal time in an unreal illusion, has anything actually happened? Of course, it is imperative to continue the inquiry so that this knowledge is absolutely certain.
So I've been thinking about this meditation about tracing out this eye. And I noticed that there's different parts of it. Or I think, the eye is this, and it's different in different situations.
In what way is it different?
Well, it's different in the way that what I'm believed to be is different, or seems to be different.
In what way different?
For instance, sometimes I think, okay, this is my responsibility, or something like, or sometimes I'll think like, oh, this is a meditation on something formless. So in all these cases, it seems like what I'm taking myself to be is different.
But the one who takes himself, is he different? What he takes himself to be and what objective definition is appended to his identity may change. It doesn't change according to the situation.
No.
Situations are dreamed up according to the identity. That is the definition. But for whom are those definitions? Is he one thing at one time and a different thing at another time?
Yeah, that would make sense. Because those objective things change. In a sense, I don't even know if they've...
The changing objective things must be seen from some unchanging vantage point. Otherwise you wouldn't know about it.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, I don't really feel like I change. I don't feel like those objective things are all changing. Those assumptions are changing about myself or about whatever it is. But actually, there is something constant there.
What changes cannot be yourself. For you exist before, during, and after the change.
Yeah, that's continuous. In other words, that existence is not breaking in pieces like those assumptions of myself.
Yes, even the first difference, that you are something other than the self, is not constant. But your existence is constant. In delusion, the sense of I is projected onto various imagined things, various thoughts, starting with the notion I, and then extending to every other notion of this. The this comes from the I. From where does the I come?
that's what you mean by that meditation.
As long as the I appears, trace out its origin. Find the source of I.
नग्रोध फलमद आहरेदीदं भगव इति भिन्दीति भिन्नं भगव इति किमत्र पश्यसीत्यनन्व इवे मा धाना भगव इत्यासंग इत्यासामंगेकां भिन्दीति भिन्ना भगव इति किमत्र पश्यतीति न किंचन भगव इति.
Vetakatu said, "May the Venerable Sir explain to me again." He said, "Let it be so, O good-looking one. Fetch a fruit from this banyan tree. It is this one, Venerable Sir. Break it. It is broken, Venerable Sir. What do you see in it? Venerable Sir, there are grains more atomic. Dear son, break one of them. It is broken, Venerable Sir. What do you see here? Nothing whatsoever, O Venerable Sir."
तगं होवाच यं वै सौम्येतमणिमानं न निभालयस एतस्य वै सौम्येशो अणिम्न एव महान्यघ्रोदस्तिष्ठति श्रद्धस्व सौम्येति.
To him he said, "O good-looking one, this subtleness which you cannot perceive, of this very subtleness of the size of an atom, O good-looking one, stands this huge banyan tree. Have faith, O good-looking one."
सय एषो अणिमैतदात्म्यमिदगं सर्वं तत्सत्यगं स आत्मा तत्त्वमसि श्वेतकेतो इति भूय एव मा भगवान् विज्ञापयित्वेति तथा सौम्येति होवाच.
That which is this subtle essence, all this has got that as the self. That is the truth, that is the self. Thou art that, O Svetakatu.
लवणमेदत् उदके अवधायाधमा प्रातरुपासीदता इति सः तथा चकार. तगं होवाच यद्दोषा लवणमुदके वाधा अंग तदाहरेति तद्धावमृश्य न विवेद.
After keeping this salt in the water, then come to me in the morning. He did accordingly. To him he said, O dear one, fetch that salt which you kept in the water at night. He could not find it after searching.
Yatha vilinam eva anganyānantarādājāmeti kathamiti lavanamiti madhyādājāmeti kathamiti lavanam ityantādāmācāmeti kathamiti lavanamityabhiprāyasyetada mopasidada iti tatha tada chakara tachat sarvam pravartate tagam hovacha tatra va kila Saumya na nibhalayase tatraiva kileti.
O dear one, you do not perceive it, remaining dissolved as it does. Now, if you want to perceive it, sip from its top. How does it taste? It is salty. Sip from the middle. How does it taste? It is salty. Sip from the bottom. How does it taste? It is salty. Throwing this away, come to me. With regard to that, he acted in that way and said, that salt exists always. To him, he, the Father, said, O good-looking one, you cannot perceive existence, though it is verily present here itself. Surely it is here.
Saya esho animaitadaatmyamidagam sarvam tat satyagam sa atma tattvamasi shvetaketo iti bhuya evama bhagavan vijñāpayitvati tatha somyeti hovacha.
That which is this subtle essence, all this has got that as the self. That is truth, that is the self. Thou art that, O Svetakatu.
Self-realization is undoubtedly of supreme importance. The very purpose of life. However, upon realization, it is found not to be an event or an occurrence. It doesn't happen. It is. And for one who realizes the self, nothing remains of him but the self. For the self, nothing then happens. It just is as it is for all eternity. The individual for whom things happen does not survive. Self-realization is characterized by an absence of I and my experience, and I for whom things would happen, etc.
Would it then mean that the very notion of a purpose, because the purpose is tied to an individual, will then disappear?
That's correct.
So would it be right then to say that the purpose of the individual is to seek self-realization then?
If the individual exists, his purpose is to seek self-realization. If inquiring to know oneself in order to attain that realization, he is found not to exist, the purpose is fulfilled.
So I was listening to the discourse, the last part about, the salt story was said. Do I understand it? I see that is a different track. That is to see that you are the same as everything else, and there isn't. Everything has the presence in it, which is different from the notion of who am I, and is that, are these two things different? Or?
No, that's not the meaning of the verse.
No. Okay, then I got it wrong.
The purpose of the verse was to point out that existence, though not discernible by the senses, is undivided and alone and is real. You, by inquiry, come to know yourself as just that existence. It is one without a second, that is, without I, without anything else whatsoever. If we say it's the same in all, it's all right. If we inquire for whom is the all, we understand.
Chapter 37, first verse. அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தினால் அத்வைத பிரம்மம் மாவா என்று உரைக்கும் அத்தியாயம். சகலமறை முடிவுக்கு முடிவேயாகி சாரங்கள் அனைத்திற்கும் சாரமான மிகவும் மகாரகசியமான நிர்ணயத்தை மெய்யுணர்வானந்த வடிவான ஈசன் அகிலவித ஜீவர்க்கும் ஹிதமேயான அத்யந்த கருணையினால் அறிந்த வண்ணம் நிகழ்வுறவே நிதகனினக்கிங்கு சொல்வான் நிச்சலமா மனதுடனே நின்று கேளாய். சர்வமுமே பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமன்றி சர்வமென பிரிதாக சிறிதும் இல்லை. இருமயுரா பிரம்மமதே நன் ஸ்வரூபம்
விதிலையும் மையமில்லை ஈசனானை அறியவனே ஆதலினால் அனைத்தும் என்றும் அகண்ட பர பிரம்மம் என்றும் அது நான் என்றும் பிரிவு பெறா பூரணமா நிச்சயத்தை பெற்றதனால் எப்போதும் சுகித்திருப்பாய். அகம் பிரம்மம் என்றுரமா நிச்சயித்தே ஆக்கை முதல் அகமென்னும் நினைவை தள்ளு. ஜகம் பிரம்மம் என்றுரமா நிச்சயித்தே ஜகத்தெல்லாம் உண்மையெனும் நினைவை தள்ளு. அகம் பிரம்மம் ஜகம் பிரம்மம் என்று வண்ணம் அனவரதம் தொடர்பாக நிச்சயிக்கில். ஜகம் பரணாம் என்னுமயருள்வோன் கையில் செறிகின்ற மலரெனவே சுயமாய் நீங்கும். வாரம் முதல் பூதமில்லை புவனமில்லை வகுக்கின்ற ஈசனிலை ஜீவனில்லை. நானுமில்லை நீயுமில்லை யாரும் இல்லை. நாமமில்லை ரூபமில்லை என்றும் எல்லாம் ஞானகனமான பர பிரம்மம் என்றே ஞான நிலை பெருமளவு நிச்சயித்தால். பானமுறும் வேகமயல் பாதவத்தின் பக்குவத்தின் பலமெனவே சுயமாய் நீங்கும். தேகமில்லை பொறிகளில்லை உயிர்களில்லை. தியங்கியிடும் மதியுமில்லை மனதும் இல்லை. ஆகும் அகங்காரமில்லை சித்தமில்லை. அதன் மூலம் ஞானமில்லை அனைத்தும் இல்லை. ஏகபர பிரம்மெனும் நிச்சயத்தை எப்போதும் தப்பாமல் அபியாசிக்கில். பாகமுறும் பலவிதமாம் வேத புத்தி பானுவினும் இருளனவே சுயமாய் நீங்கும். நனவுமில்லை கனவுமில்லை துயிலும் இல்லை. நாடியிடும் துரியமில்லை நானாவில்லை. வினமருவும் யஷ்டி இல்லை சமஷ்டி இல்லை. பிரிவுற்ற பிரபஞ்சம் எமையும் இல்லை. அனவரதம் அகிலமுமே பிரம்மம் என்றும் அகண்ட பர நிச்சயமிங்கடைந்தேயத்தால். மனதினுடை விகப்பமெல்லாம் மாற்றி என்றும் மகத்தான பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். அகில அதிஷ்டான பர பிரம்மத்தின் கண் அழகனவே கற்பிதமாய் காண்பதெல்லாம் திகழும் அதிஷ்டான பர பிரம்மமன்றி தினையளவும் மன்னியமாய் இல்லை என்று தகமை மிகும் விசாரணையால் நேதி பண்ணி தத்பிரம்ம நிச்சயமிங்கடைந்தேயத்தால். இகழும் மனோவிகற்பங்கள் அனைத்தும் நீக்கி எப்போதும் பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். அயலனவே அறிவுற்ற துவைத்தமென்றும் அவை நீக்கும் அகண்ட பர விசாரமென்றும் அயல் வடிவாம் சர்வமுமே மித்த என்றும் மற்றவையும் மத்தியந்த மசத்தே என்றும் பயிலும் இவ்விதமாம் தோற்றமெல்லாம் பகுபற்ற பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமன்றே. அயலனுகா அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் அத்வைத பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். நித்தமுடன் அனித்தத்தின் விவேகமென்றும் நிகழ்கின்ற குணதோஷ விவேகமென்றும் பக்தனோடு முக்தனுடை விவேகமென்றும் பாவமுடன் பாவத்தின் விவேகமென்றும் விஸ்தரமாய் விளங்கிய வித்தோற்றமெல்லாம் விபுவான விமல பரஸ்வரூபமென்றே அஸ்தமுரா அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் அத்வைத பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். சுருதி முதல் பலவிதமாய் நூல்கள் என்றும் சொல்லியிடும் ஆசிரியர் சீடர் என்றும் திருசியமா தேகமுடல் நானே என்றும் திருக்குருவாம் பரபிரம்ம நானே என்றும் பிரிவுறவே பிறங்கிய இத்தோற்றமெல்லாம் பின்னமிலா பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே மருவிய இவ்வகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் மகத்தான பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். அகமனிஷம் பாசமுறும் ஜீவனென்றும் அகமனிஷம் பந்தமிலா பிரம்மென்றும் விகலமுறும் ஜகமுதலீர் உண்மை என்றும் விசித்திரமான் ஜகமுதலீர் இல்லை என்றும் வெகுவிதமாய் விளங்கிய இத்தோற்றமெல்லாம் வியாபகமாம் பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே மகிமை மிகும் அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் மகத்தான பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். தினந்தவிராதியற்றியிடும் கர்மமென்றும் திடமாக செய்கின்ற பக்தி என்றும் அனந்தவித தெய்வ உபாசனைகள் என்றும் அத்தெய்வ மூர்த்திகளின் பூஜை என்றும் மனதனிலே மருவிய இத்தோற்றமெல்லாம் மகத்தான பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே கணந்தவிரா அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் களங்கமிலா பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். எனதென்னதென்றிடும் மமத என்றும் யானென்றிடும் மகந்த என்றும் வினமருவும் பாக்கியமாம் விஷயமென்றும் பிரிவுற்ற ஆந்தரமாம் விஷயமென்றும் வினமருவும் இவ்விதமாம் தோற்றமெல்லாம் இருமையிலா பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே கணமருவும் அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் கலங்கமிலா பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். வானமுதல் பஞ்சமகாபூதமென்றும் வசன முதல் பஞ்சவித விஷயமென்றும் மானியுறும் அனந்தவித உலகமென்றும் அளவற்ற பிரம்மாண்ட கோடி என்றும் ஊனமுறும் நிர்விதமாம் தோற்றமெல்லாம் உணர்வுருவாம் பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே ஈனமுரா அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் இருமையிலா பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். செரிகின்ற விதி முதலை மூர்த்தி என்றும் சிருஷ்டி முதல் 5 வித கிருத்தியமென்றும் அறிகின்ற சுரர் முனிவர் நரர்கள் என்றும் அலைவுற்ற அநேகவித திரியென்றும் நெறி கொண்ட இவ்விதமாம் தோற்றமெல்லாம் நிர்மலமாம் பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே இருக்கின்ற அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் இருமையிலா பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய். தடமருவும் தீர்த்தங்கள் ஸ்தலங்கள் என்றும் தயங்கியிடும் தேவதைகள் சேவை என்றும் மடவுகிரி வாரிதிகள் நதிகள் என்றும் மங்குற்ற அநேகவித உயிர்கள் என்றும் தொடர்புருவித்வைதத்தின் தோற்றமெல்லாம் துகளற்ற பரபிரம்ம ஸ்வரூபமென்றே இதமருவும் அகண்ட பர நிச்சயத்தால் இருமையிலா பரபிரம்ம மாத்திரமாவாய்.